Welcome back to the 10 Adventures podcast. Today we're going to be inspired by Ann Whatmore, who recently cycled almost 4,000 kilometers around the UK, all the while dealing with severe eosinophilic asthma. Her journey demonstrating the power of positive thinking and saying yes as a means to conquer her disability. Hi, Ann. Welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Richard. It's great to be here.
Before we talk about your inspirational journey, I'd like to know a little bit about how you got to this point. And I guess the first question is, have you always been an adventurer and a cyclist?
Now, that's quite a sort of two-weighted sort of question. Adventurer, I think, in mindset, but not the sort of go outdoors and tackle things. As in what's portrayed as an adventurer. I'd never cycled neither, only as a child, but I haven't been on a bike for a good 30 years. So it was eye-opening and sort of out of my comfort zone.
And as I mentioned at the start, you also are dealing with severe eosinophilic asthma. Can you maybe share a little bit about what that is and how it impacts your day-to-day life?
Yes, it's a rare and form of severe asthma. It's really hard to control with medication. There's about 4% of UK sufferers, which there are 5.4 million in the UK that suffer with asthma, but only 4% have severe form, and only 14% of those severe have treatment with biological injections like I do to control my asthma. Without the injections, I can't walk up the stairs. I couldn't walk down to my village shops. I could need help dressing and eating and things like that. So it really impacts my day-to-day life. Luckily for me, I'm responding well to the biological treatment that I inject every 8 weeks, as well as take a load of other steroids and medications as well. But so that's enabled me to get outside and be able to do what I did.
And how long have you been dealing with this issue?
I didn't get severe asthma till after I had COVID. I caught COVID on the 23rd of March 2020 at the beginning when it hit the UK. It left me with a limited lung function. I only have a sixth of my lung function left. It left me with long COVID as well. And that seemed to alter my asthma. Until that point, I was like majority of sufferers, well managed, and on just, a preventer inhaler when I needed it, and a day-to-day inhaler. But otherwise, it was really well covered. The odd blip with chest infection, but generally I was fine and fettled. I was sailing and swimming and very active, and then COVID hit me, and then after that, for the last 4.5 years, I've now struggled to breathe, which is something most people take for granted.
And I know some people who have been dealing with long COVID, obviously, different from what you're dealing with, but it's had enormous mental health impacts on them, basically not being able to return to a normal life. How has your eosinophilic asthma, how has that impacted your mental health in terms of not being able to do all the things you used to do so easily?
I had to get help from mental health doctors and nurses. I had to seek treatment. I got into a very dark place. I basically had to grieve for the person I lost, the person I used to be. And I had great difficulty in accepting that where I could have done lots of things in the past, I didn't have the energy or the capability to even, socialize or get myself to be independent. I was relying on help of family and my partner to just basic daily function, and that seemed like climbing Everest at the time, just going up the stairs. So it was very, very dark place.
That sounds so challenging. It also seems interesting that from that place you decided to ride a bike around Great Britain, especially considering you hadn't been a bike rider before. What was the genesis to, go from this dark place and take on what is a serious challenge even for committed bike riders, but even more serious for you without the cycling background?
I think that my main inspiration was a chap called Dave Cornthwaite, who's an adventurer and leader of the Say Yes More community. I do a lot of recumbent trike rides, over 1,000 kilometers and 1,000 miles, and I wanted to, it gave me the idea maybe I could try. So I got in touch with the rehabilitation centre for the disabled down in Exeter, and a chap there let me try various different trikes, and it was just like I just couldn't stop crying with joy. It was just so exhilarating, the feeling of self-powered independence. Although I have to stress I have electronic assisted. All of a sudden, I wasn't relying on anyone else but myself, and I could choose where I wanted to go. And it was great to be back outside again, whizzing along. I never stopped laughing the whole trial. But it took me 2.5 years to wait, to save up and to sort out to get a trike. It was a long time goal, and it didn't happen quickly.
So I'd never heard about the Say Yes tribe until I started doing some research on your trip and yourself. Can you maybe talk a little bit more about, what is the ethos of the Say Yes tribe? Because it is, obviously super powerful and impactful, as evidenced by, what you did.
It's a large community and it's international reach now. It's all about being adventurous, living adventurously in your mindset, being brave, being positive, but most of all, being kind. It's a wonderful organisation that relies on the kindness and is influenced, not relies, but influenced on the kindness of strangers, and the help and support throughout the whole community, into regional areas and regional little communities where, they organise events. If you've never tried something before, you're encouraged, or you can, people will share their kit or share their experience and their knowledge. And it's all done free, it's all done by the kindness of everybody in the group. And you meet up once a year and have stories, and there's a festival, and you can be inspired by lots of people's adventures, big and small.
That just sounds like such a kind of a wholesome group doing, kind things. It's so nice kind of in the modern landscape where we just hear about bad things, to hear there's a whole community focused on just like being positive and helping each other. And obviously for you, it had a huge impact. How did the community support you from when you kind of started to think about doing this ride to actually going to do it?
Oh gosh, I had so much help. I wouldn't have been able to do it really without their support. I had that offered their help with advice on kit. I had people that were. I had a wonderful chap called John who helped me with setting up. Came down and drove quite a way to come down and help set up my trike before I left and give it a once over. I had advice on how to pitch tents and how to cook or what to eat on the track on the trip. It was just a vast wealth of knowledge, and everybody did it. There was no monetary gain. There was not for ego. It was just purely because they wanted you to succeed and to achieve your dreams, really.
And not being a cyclist, what was the physical preparation for this ride? How did you, just sitting on a bike for that long? I know at the start of each year, is painful, but, doing a 3,800 kilometer ride, what was the training you undertook?
This is where I have to fess up and put my hands up and say, actually, I did none. In all good intention, I got the bike in the August of last year. It arrived late, and I thought I'd set to, and the weather was terrible, and I kept thinking, I've got ages yet, it's fine. Then by Christmas, I fell with COVID again, and I tore my ACL ligament in my knee, which meant I couldn't walk about very well when I was under physiotherapy. So that impacted the training. So the most I'd managed to do on the trike before I left was about a handful of rides doing 22 kilometres, and that was it. And I just thought, I'm just going to go for it. I've got all day to each stage. I started small, and I just thought I'll get fit on the way. And that was sort of, I suppose, my naivety, but my blind faith and determination, really.
Can you describe your route a little bit, kind of like in big picture, what part of Great Britain you rode through?
Okay, so I live on the south coast, very fortunate. I live in the most beautiful part with the Jurassic coast. I live in the county of Dorset, and I started from my home at Corfe Castle, and I cycled and headed to the start, which was Land's End. That took me 6 days to get the actual start of the Land's End to John O'Groats trip. I followed a guidebook called Britain's Greatest Bike Ride, which basically gave me the route up to John O'Groats. And then I went up, when I got to John O'Groats after 19 days, I then went up round Orkney. And my main plan was to get to Shetland, but unfortunately, timings and trying to charge my battery and my energy level meant I couldn't do Shetland. So I had a point where I felt like it was a failure, but then I sort of had great support from the community and said, look, this is your trip, your adventure, you make the rules. I wasn't in any form of race or anything, so I just spent longer in Orkney and the north coast of Scotland, and then I aimed to get down in time to speak at the Say Yes Small Festival on my birthday in June, and I came down the east coast of Britain and finished at Boston, Lincolnshire. So it was just over 2,000 miles I had to amend trip, and that took a lot to accept and process, that I hadn't failed, but I had to adapt.
And in doing this, what were the daily distances you were riding?
Anything from the shortest day was 70 kilometres The longest day would be 2 stages of, say, like a 70-kilometer and a 90-kilometer. So some days up to 11 hours in the saddle. Although I should say seat, not saddle, because you're sat in it, not on it.
And you were new to camping, and were you camping throughout, or did you mix in some stays in, traditional accommodations?
I mixed in. It was, say, 70% was camping. The majority of camping done in Scotland, and also Cornwall. And then I had about 5 stays in a hotel, which was great because you could wash your kit and dry it on the towel rails and on the heated floors, and you get a decent shower, and occasionally treat myself to a really good slap-up meal. And then the other times it was just coping with putting up a tent and camping and cooking on a small stove and sort of getting by.
And so when you were doing this, what was it, what were you feeling doing these things you thought you'd lost and doing things you hadn't done before? Like in the moment, were you really proud of yourself, or were you just so focused on the pain of cycling up to 11 hours a day that you were just kind of just getting by?
I think even up to now, I haven't really taken in. It feels a bit surreal that I actually did it. In the moment, I literally it was just find somewhere that I could charge my bike, because that was one of the biggest headaches. I had to carry a spare battery and always find a campsite where I could charge my electric trike. So that was an added complexity. And just the whole thing, after being tired at the end of the day, my grand plan was to do social media every day. I bought a drone and a video camera to vlog, but I was so exhausted. I hadn't appreciated that, with my lung condition, just how tiring it would be, that the social media and the updates and everything had to be put on hold. And the focus was then just each day doing the mileage, getting to the destination spot and pitching tent. Trying to find also something to eat. That was a challenge. A lot of the places I thought would be open through COVID, a lot of small community shops and businesses had closed. So there weren't as many places to stop to buy or shop to get food. I had it in my head there'd be these quaint English little tea rooms that I could go and get a cake and a cup of tea en route. And I didn't come across hardly any of them. So it was sort of then relying on noodles and boiled noodles for food.
Incredible. For those who haven't ridden in the UK, can you maybe share a little bit what the roads and traffic was like? I think a lot of us think of, the busy M1 or the traffic around London where the people think, how can you ride in that? But what was your experience?
I mean, I ended up being on dual carriageways. So like the A1, the A9, the A30 with, you're low to the ground and cycling along with lorries doing, and cars and vehicles doing 70 miles per hour past you, and thundering past. The majority of my ride, it seemed to be raining, so you'd be covered in spray. And so visibility, you're trying to see through the rain and the spray of the lorries as they passed. The road conditions here in the UK are frankly not great at all. We don't have a dedicated good system of cycle pathways throughout the UK that are linked. We do have cycle networks, but the condition of them are horrendous in places, and a lot have gates on them and barriers which are not compliant with a trike. So I'd come across a number of obstacles in each day that I had to then, unpack everything off the trike and lift it or carry it or squeeze it on its side through places. Or I relied on the help of public, to lift and carry everything across for me. The roads were tough, and full of potholes, so the services weren't good neither. You couldn't weave yourself around them so much because the trike's width, you'd end up, taking over the whole road and getting in the way of traffic. But it was an eye-opener to the conditions around the UK.
And then how many days total did you spend cycling your route?
I did 50s in all. I took up all my annual leave and some. I was lucky that my boss is my partner and allowed me to fulfill a dream. I did 50 days of cycling in the end, from start to finish.
And are there certain parts of the ride that were, beautiful or impactful or, meaningful for you?
Yes. Cornwall was terrifying because I'd read in all the guidebooks that it would be tough. The hills would be really bad. But that was stunning scenery. But for me, Braemar and the Scottish Highlands were just to be cycling amongst mountains. There's a famous pass that called the Lecht, which is a black ski run, and it snakes its way up the mountain. And I pedalled up it. And I just said to myself, you take one snow pole at a time. And slowly I made my way up to the top, and the view from the top and the long downhill freewheel down was just worth everything. It was just the most awesome scenery out there, breathtaking. I think it's very easy to forget what's on your own doorstep or in your own country. A lot of people want to travel and go afar, but you don't have to go far to have adventure. You can have your adventure from your own, front door.
I couldn't agree more. And having lived in the UK before, I always feel it's this underrated destination. There's so much beauty in the national parks and areas of outstanding natural beauty that dot the country, from, mountains and hills and coastline. And it feels like the rest of the world doesn't realize how beautiful the UK is. They think of London and a few other cities, and they don't realize you can really get lost in these beautiful places.
It's such a breadth of diversity of landscape, from the whole of, the mountains of Scotland, and you've got Wales, and you've got moors, and just stunning scenery. You'd have some very challenging climbs. And one day, my battery, I didn't time things right. It was in the early days. I wasn't planning it very well. And I ran out of juice in my batteries. They went flat. And I had to push up a 2-kilometre hill that was at 17% incline. And that, virtually nearly killed me off. And I got to the top and was in tears and wanted to throw the towel in. But when you saw the views from the top, it put everything else, into small insignificance, really. It just was stunning.
You write on your website that I have taken steps to get back to the old me, the person I had thought I had lost, who had been consumed by my disabilities. Having done this, big bike ride, do you feel that you've become the person you were?
I'm a different person, maybe even a better person. I took an awful lot for granted before I became ill. I was always rushing and dashing and busy with work, and work always came first. And did long hours, and I was a rep on the road a lot. So having become ill, it makes you appreciate being able to breathe, knowing that I'm reliant on the medication, and thankfully it's working and I'm responding well. But there are so many others out there that aren't. This trip's sort of humbled me. And you're cycling in mountains, in the highlands. The scenery is so big and vast. You're alone and on your own, and miles maybe from help. You have a lot of time to think and soul search. And I think it's made me a much better person.
It's interesting you mentioned that. It's just, I think you're right. This time on your own in our day-to-day life, we always have stuff going on. We've got places to go, people to see, there's distractions on TV or our phones. But when you're on one of these big trips where you're either cycling or walking or, doing anything, you don't have the distractions, and you're able to sit back and you kind of have these great realizations. And most people don't have kind of the realizations that I think you have, but it's really valuable, I think, to kind of reset who you are. Is that kind of how you feel? That one of the results of this trip is you reset kind of who you were.
Yes, I couldn't agree more. It made me have to be. I got to the point where I thought I couldn't do anything and it wasn't worth carrying on. I was in such a dark place, being treated for suicidal thoughts and tendencies and ideation, and I'd given up hope of everything. When you're out on your own, the only person there is yourself to talk to, and you sort of end up sort of seeing yourself like through a mirror, and really having time to, which we know we don't have time generally, but I had the time to sort of really look at myself and look at what I wanted to do and wanted to be. And then as the journey went on, suddenly to see the marker on the map shoot up and shoot along, and have people's, comments and the kindness of the people I met on the way, was really humbling and inspiring. And it just was like, well, actually, you can do this. You can do things. You just got to maybe approach it differently, and not maybe as every an ordinary person would. You have to think a bit more, but it just opened up my eyes to what's important. Family, friends, the community. And taking time more. And although I believe in the say yes more, it's sometimes you have to say yes to saying no, and give yourself time to do things that we sometimes think can wait, and you shouldn't wait. You should appreciate your time you have.
And so, you went into this wanting to do this one bike ride. Are you now dreaming up other adventures? And if so, what are you thinking about for your next big adventure?
My next big adventure is going to be Ireland. I want to do the Wild Atlantic Way. At the moment, I think I'll arrive in Dublin and then cycle to the start down near Cork, and then I'll do the whole west coast. So that should take me another, say, 40 days to do. But the scenery for the west coast of Ireland's renowned for being spectacular. So I can't wait to really get out there and try that again. But that will be in a year or two's time, when I save up and plan it a bit more. I'm a bit more aware of what I can do and what I can't do.
I want to say thank you for coming on the show today, and it was so inspirational to hear of your journey. And and kind of taking that leap to do that bucket list adventure. I'm sure there's lots of people who are thinking about doing something great, but they need that nudge, and hearing your story, I think, will help them to, make that plans for next summer to go and do something they've always wanted to do.
I think it's important. It doesn't grand adventures are great, but also small ones at home. The hardest and biggest part of the adventure is taking that first step out the doorway. And whether that's in your mind, I've bought books and maps and plans and guidebooks for years before I took the courage. And it wasn't till I got ill that I thought it's now or never. I think it's really important that people can start small and just give it a go. Do a long weekend, go for a hike, go for a bike ride, pitch a tent overnight and have fun with it, really. And then if you want to start on something big, you can. You just put yourself out there and be vulnerable. If you need help, like I had a couple of punctures that I couldn't manage to fix myself, and strangers helped and stopped and got out their car, and there's always positive and kindness out there. It's not such a bad place, really.
That's wonderful advice. And to end this, you did this ride to benefit Asthma and Lung UK. Can you share a bit more about how people can donate and learn more about your ride?
Yes, if they go to my website, I have a website, Wandering Whatmore, that has all the links on it to my fundraising page and the start of my blog. I have to admit, I've got to now sit down. Now it's winter, and I'll update it more and put more pictures of the ride and the actual event. I've had time to process and soak in, really, what I've done. But you can find me Wandering Whatmore on Instagram and Facebook and on my website.
Excellent. I'll put the links to those in the show notes. And with that, thank you for listening to this episode of the 10 Adventures podcast. We'll be back next week to explore the world and hear about more epic adventures. Start planning your own adventure by visiting us at 10adventures.com and listen to other episodes of the 10 Adventures podcast on Amazon Music, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere else you find your podcasts.